Our next presenter this evening is Edgar D'mello. The principal at EDA Bangalore is an architect, curator, author, and an interpreter traveler. Has attended schools in Delhi SPA and the TU at Delhi, and has taught at various schools in the south, more recently as an adjunct faculty at the RVCA Bangalore. In 2000, Edgar started Tag and Be, the architecture, gallery and bookshop, a platform to bring together practitioners, academics, and students. This morphed into a collab, a visual initiative that investigates the making of architecture through the conjecture of various other disciplines, especially art. He has also authored architecture fables for children, as well as illustrated travelogues of curated trips. More than interested to look into this. Edgar, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to first say that, I've always been impressed because I get this book every year about that trajectory that Mindspace and Rohan Builders have been able to achieve in a very small span of time, 1 decade, I think, and been able to take this on an international level is nothing short of quite astounding. Also, Uday, thanks very much for that very enlightening talk. My talk actually is about the ephemeral nature of architecture. And I think when you come at a certain age, you begin to go back and ask yourself, what was the important point when either things changed or they, and you went in a new direction. And that happened to me actually when I was invited to for today. So this is actually quite a sort of event-specific talk. It shows some of the work, but I think it's more to do with the allied disciplines that architecture is partnered with, which has always interested and excited me. So whilst I was doing this, because I've been writing now for quite a long time, started before the pandemic, and maybe it's in my 7th, 8th year, I think it was finally to literature that I fell back on to make sense of my work within this presentation. I will share a very small S in that SMLXL measure, work that I found to be perhaps a little appropriate to discuss today, showing as well, discuss also. But it will not just be architecture, it will be art, it will be about galleries, it will be about poetry, it will be about a reading of a very surreal meeting with one of the masters. So ephemeral has now presently been a very important area of my interest. And it's not just with architecture, it's with writing as well. So I think, life itself is that way. And it's always in constant change. And I began to see all my work in the way it changed. And I thought that that was actually such a wonderful way to take one project and look at it going through 4 avatars. As time changed, as family grew, as ideas grew, and as people came together. So it is intimate and at times personal. Some of these works have gone through, as I said, multiple transfigurations. A small home built over an existing roof, part of it of my father, soon became larger as the family expanded. Years later becoming an office, and finally a project of 4 residences. In another, a commercial space turning into an architecture studio, a few years later morphing into an architecture gallery, and then into an art gallery. Finally, when the gallery went virtual, returning to an office again. So I was looking at all these trajectories that were, going all across in the first 20 years of my life. And I was quite amazed, at how it happened. And I also looked at it in one way in which you sustain things is through change. It's not through permanence. You sustain it through change. So that's why, like I started to talk and turn to literature for some sense of clarity and a sense of purpose. Anita Desai's book title I thought was apt for my predicament. I have now begun to identify myself as an architect of disappearance. I'm not seen much in architecture circles. Today is an exception. Anyway, and I've begun to think of myself not as an architect anymore, but as a craftsman, but a particular type of craftsman, or a crafty architect, I thought. But no, that's without the cunning. So, crafting the same space or project again and again. This pattern repeated itself, as you will soon see, and I started to warm up to the idea. Of course, as I said, each project had to have its last rites, and for the once upon a time first love. Here, Ian McEwan gave me that courage. In one of his short stories, that is called Solid Geometry, a complex kinetic architecture of the body performed by not an architect, but by a scientist at a convention, part yogi, part contortionist, he slowly but surely makes himself disappear. A very exciting idea, but it takes a bizarre turn. Nothing new, of course, to us architects, but we have no time for that. Okay, so much for literature. Now let's get back to architecture. It is usual that one tends to show work in a chronological, linear sort of manner, or through building typology format. But I've chosen to do it a bit differently. As I said, I'm choosing a somewhat lateral way by starting at the middle. In the 40-odd years of my engagement with our discipline, and the midpoint was the year 2000. I often call it the turning point. It had been a sort of revelation, a lens through which I reassessed the work done from the start, 1980, and reassessed the work also done towards the end, 2020, when the pandemic hit, and I closed shop to return to mentor a small young practice. They chose that word. So let me start now from the beginning, or let's say from the turning point, which is year 2000. I acquired a small office space of 860 square feet in the center of the city, shifting my office there in 1990. It was filled with a soft light and surrounded by green cover, although experienced on a second floor. Some of the work you will see today was made there, but requiring a bigger space and closer to home, we shifted 8 years later, and the idea of an architecture gallery came into being. It was in my mind for quite some time, and the group that we had formed together, 7 of us, we thought somehow that this informal way in which we were meeting always had to take some sort of a formal structure. So that was the group. So you can recognize one in it. And the doors opened in 2000. Until then, we had taken pride in our informality, but I think once this opened, it became a go-to place. It became a sort of, we have all heard of a halfway home, where, itinerant children are sent to. But this was like a halfway school, where students just came to hang out, to look at the books, because it's an architecture gallery and bookshop. I talk about it as the architecture of Tag and B, because it was just that, interior architecture. Now, of course, design has become a buzzword, but interior architecture was the way this worked out. So that was the entrance, and it had a whole lot of elements that had posters, books, and other artifacts that were connected to what an architecture gallery might become. At the initial function of the opening, we had done a thing called mediating space in 4 movements. And this was one. This wall had 4 windows. The 2 had a thing like this, in which 3 would open to have 1 window open, or 2 would open, windows would be closed. So you had many ways in which you could use the panels, the 4 panels on both sides. And this was, a complete writing out of Frampton's, I think it was called the Manifesto for the New Millennium. And that was exactly the time when this gallery opened. That was in the year 2000. One of these things is it's very reassuring. It was all about what important architects had said, even just one-liners. Like Scarpa says, I draw because I want to see. But what Caesar says is quite, as I said, modest. Looked at closely, my work will, I think I have it somewhere here. Looked at closely, my work will reveal all its fragilities, all its failures, everything that has not been resolved, a sort of premature suspension. At the same time, my ego feels a moment of delight, you paying attention to my projects. It's something that he's been saying all his life, actually. What happened at the gallery, every month there were 3 different events. One was an exhibition, one was a book reading, somebody showed their work, or we had a video show of the latest stuff that came from Holland, where I had a connection. We also made what architect Bruno Souza, he called it a universe of ideas. Every 2 years, we bring out a folio or a poster in which we addressed issues. And we, for instance, border crossings looked at how our our discipline is fed by other disciplines. It was anthropology, art, music, whatever. So, and of course, we had some very provocative ones like confrontation, interrogations, where we looked at the status quo in our discipline. We need to critique every few years about where we are heading. And this thing between confrontation of practice and academia was extremely important. Now I go back to the beginning. That's 1980. I just come back from 7 years of wandering, sometimes with a purpose, sometimes just nomadic. And my father had this, I told you it would be intimate and personal. So he had a site, a roof really. The thing was already built below. And I built one part of it where there was a courtyard and there was a blank wall for a base to get together and watch sides of work, others' work, travel. So it was a very heady time. And this was one of the what were non-negotiable sort of unwritten rules. Anybody who built that wall and that projector had to be extremely important. Then, of course, as the family grew, the court became larger, and that stayed the same. And there were bigger events. And at the 2 bedrooms, there was a mezzanine to that bedroom. The kitchen had shifted. The courtyard, most importantly, enlarged. A court that had numerous luminaries holding court, actually. Architects, engineers, writers, curators, storytellers. So it was a very action-packed. There were 2 of such houses. One was our dear friend Nikhil Armi, who passed away rather early. These were 2 areas that had this sort of energy. And you might ask, why did you meet in homes and not in your offices? It's a very simple thing to that, is because one thought it was not quite proper to drink in an office, and drinking at home was okay. This is just some of the pictures of, and finally it came down, and it's now 4 floors of 4 apartments. But not before we took away, as I said, memories and metaphors. We took away I've never used a wallpaper in my life, but I got a picture of this coat and took it with me to Goa. And a very, innocuous looking apartment corner, we got the idea of the 50 De Costa layout preserved. So it's sort of multimedia nostalgia. When we had one of our base meetings, Doshi had sent to us Ori Siriani. He was a Parisian architect, and I was quite taken up by that phrase that he used, the democratization of space. And it seemed just relevant for us, for our country. Coming from a seasoned socialist professor, he stood on the battle lines in Paris with the students, the architecture students, when they were fighting for change and for renewal. So these are 4 projects. One is Project Shelter for street children. One is a house for a CEO, though he doesn't like to be called that. It was for Action Aid, the head of Action Aid. The third is the office for that Action Aid and another one. And the fourth is a house for an artist and a writer. Why I show this together is it has a sort of a thread that goes through. And it's not just material. I think it's space. It's how you look at everybody equally. That when these boys and girls sat with me and asked them what do they want most importantly in their building, I was taken aback that one girl said a library, which I had never thought of, and somebody else said a bank, because they're always rag pickers, street children. The first thing the police goes to put their hand in their pocket, takes their money. So we added those. So we sat with all of these owners almost on our clients on the same sort of platform. So I'll just take you, so these were the clients. So we expressed a raw building, not because they were raw, but I think that there was a certain robustness to them. So we used concrete blocks, and we used the Valyapatna system of jack arches, and you saw everything rotated around this court. You came in from there, and you come in from there. Here, there's a small little space for the one who looks after the place. You come in, courtyard, staircase. This is eating space. This is the kitchen. This is a small guest suite. This is a sort of office. And on top, there are dormitories. We had made them classrooms once, but then they became dormitories. So these are just some of the images. It was very interesting when the scientists came at the opening and asked me. I didn't recognize them, and I was very embarrassed. Nice building, but did you ever think of rounding the corners, he said, to make it a little curved? I mean, he was not involved in the construction business, so he was a very big scientist. I mean, he was, I think he was the scientific advisor to Indira Gandhi, lived in Professor Dhawan, Satish Dhawan. And he said, you can't take it for granted because these boys are street children, that they will not get hurt when they run and play. And it stayed in my mind for quite long, that we sort of get so excited about the concrete, the block, the sharpness of it, but we forget the humanity in our architecture. So this is now completely a different building. We try to get the essence, or let's say, like I said, the thread that ran through. Again, there's a courtyard here, and that's a garage with an office on top. There are not many pictures of this. There are no pictures of this at all, but I made some drawings. This was the two NGOs that had one there, one here, and the center was a court, and they joined only at one floor of the ground and on the third floor. The rest, the light came through to that, to these things. It was all filled up in this space. It's very sad that things got corrupted, as we know, and all the photographs disappeared. This is all that we have that shows one side MCC, the other side Mahiti. This fourth one is for an artist and a writer. I spoke to him about the projects we had done earlier, and he was very excited that we follow the same sort of language, same materiality, but give him a home for his wife and two children, and a studio on top. S.G. Vasudev, maybe you all have heard of him. And he gave me his one of his pictures that I made an invitation for. And I think the whole of base was there at that time, including Sanjay, Nikki. So this was just something here. You came in like this, outside, you come in, courtyard, stairs, dining, kitchens. There was a nala running here. So it is important to have buffers. So we did a little kitchen, we took it away, we opened it from the front. And here were the bedrooms, the family room. And this is where we put the studio on top. I mean, it was not needed to be separated. We used the same staircase. This is what it was when we finished it. And this is what they've done before they left. So as I said, again, there's a churning going on, you know, and the thing is, since they moved out, it's now become an art it's becoming an art residency. Some of the interior shots. That's the studio on top. This is an orphanage that Bijoy Ramchandran talks a lot about. Unfortunately, also part of the corruption process, but we've been able to salvage some photographs that give an idea of the sort of sweep of this building. It was for a church, so they didn't want too much of a presence, you know, sort of confronting it. So we sort of tried to dematerialize it into a point. This is the entrance space where they do all sorts of martial arts, and it's a small waiting space. Everything rotates on the staircase. Yeah, I thought it would be good to put in an infill project in an urban situation, since that's what we are going to be talking about tomorrow. But this is, of course, a very modest thing in the center of Bangalore, very close to Commercial Street. There's this party walls, 46 feet, 46 feet, 49 feet deep. And this is a site that we addressed. At the end of this was a temple. And I've got some pictures of this year. Otherwise, this was finished in the year 2000. That's why I refer to it as the Millennial House, or the Millennium House, even though it's about restructuring an old building. So these were the streets, the left and the right, and it had a particular energy because it was, you can see, it was a lot of outdoor. People had these, what we call jugglies in Bangalore, verandas, covers, and it's only about, I think, 14 feet wide. So that was in 2000, that's in 2020. So this is where you come off the street, and that is that the sort of seat there that comes into a juggly foyer. Since there's only light coming from one side, the court like what Korea says, you have to depend on the blessings from the sky. But there was a bit of a fiasco because I wanted to keep the court open, and for that we've had a water body which would recycle the water, and then they chickened out, and all this structure that was to to protect this part is now like a fossil, like a. So the important thing really is that we at the beginning we said that we would make it quietly fit into the on the street. We would not make any big grand gesture. So as you enter, the whole volume sort of opens out. That's the skylight at the top here. But of course, this is now, we tried our very best to dismantle this, to get this whole volume to come in, but it's the way it is. Then the stairs that goes up onto the terrace. So the light is all from here and a bit from the front. So he bought a site opposite it to park his cars. He's got 3 cars. So we were able to get a photograph recently now that showed the full extent. Otherwise at 15 feet you couldn't get it unless you stitched it. Now this is what I call a transformation. There's a school that we did in Bangalore that had an 85-year history at the end. Now they have celebrated their centenary. The Mahila Seva Samaj School. Our first part was to build under a huge rain tree, probably 100 feet across. The girth might have been 15 to 20 feet, massive tree. And this was the, where is that now? That's the old building with a court. And this is, somebody else has done a multi-purpose hall. This was the thing here with the tree from there, and we did that part and toilets. So the old school, in a courtyard, and we inserted this with the wall. They wanted to change the wall. We kept the wall. You can see the school inserting itself into an old wall and the tree coming out quite comfortably. So obviously that's the reason why we did that. So these things open on 2 sides, because there are 3 sides of the road. So this is one entry into the school. So when you enter on the right, you come in, that's the tree. It's a huge girth. And it was important for the school that they had one open space within, but sheltered, because they already had one that was not covered, which was where the tree was. So that is what you see. And we thought that if we had to do something to it, we needed to be able to always see the tree. So I'm told that there are still students who stand on this. This is for a primary school. They still look through the glass at the tree. From the other side. This is the second part. So first part was this. The second part is that. Then we come to the third part. So this has it became a secondary school. So there were a whole lot of classrooms and labs and computer labs and things, and the toilets shifted from here to there. So unfortunately, as you can see here, these columns that are going that side, we just didn't get the picture. So this is actually a render, unfortunately. This is the inside. Everybody there was excited about using color, so there was a lot of color used. Staircases played an important part because kids, hang around, what do you call it, landings. There are places like this where they sit around. So there's things that also happen outside the classroom. This was the third part, which unfortunately didn't get built this year. We also had 3 large trees. This was for a library. That was the library. And it had places for performing arts and the fine arts. So this is one thing now they are looking for funds. I've just had fun in showing this. Not often does one get a chance to build two houses next to each other, and they have very little in common. And a lot of people ask me why. Why can't you carry over the thread, things like that? You design for people, and people are different. The first house was built when this one came to me. So they had seen it more or less in finished form. It was a very ordered sort of house in which you had a lower vault here and a higher vault there, because this had 2 floors, this had just 1.5. And inside there was a courtyard and another courtyard here. And they were both IS people, so they were always on the move. But they've now retired and they're sort of beginning to enjoy the house. But the other house next door, I'll come to that, doesn't have anything in common. And I myself wonder why. But the client said that, look, we like that house a lot, we like the form, but could we do it differently? So the only thing I had to tell them was sustainability, not in its, in its, what do you call it, the muscular form of materiality, but quietly doing things, brick arches, brick walls in this, and what do you call it, these pillar slabs in the other one, and butterfly roofs. So this is the first house. These are, hollow blocks, clay. Interesting thing here was that, very often, we sometimes think that clients should live like us, but they don't. They have different baggage that we have. And I'm just trying to see how a house, when it's finished this way, actually takes sort of form which I go there now and again, I'm beginning to enjoy. Even the court, nice and this is the other house, so we didn't use terracotta blocks, we used stone and we used butterfly roofs with pillar slabs. This is that surreal experience I'm talking about, and I thought the cover should sort of illustrate it. I have friends who are in the Nilgiris, and they had bought a piece of land, which was a little more than an acre, and they had decided that they wanted me as a neighbor, and I knew why, because they wanted me to build their house, because I didn't want to build it because it's just too far from Bangalore. But because I was going to do my house, I had to do theirs, finally. But when I said poetry, I told her that, look, I've written a poem, because that's the time when we decided, it was Easter Sunday, as it says in one of them. And we were at lunch, and the day before that, I had written this poem, because the site is absolutely stunning. It's just, the mist and the green, and so I want to read the poem, if you all will allow me. A grey mist spreads its veil of solitude. The melancholy earth awaits the plough, not for grain, but for seed, the seed of an idea that will sprout its plastic offering at the altar of asceticism. 3 masonry and glass boxes, 2 white and 1 grey, crane their necks into the deep valley, structured yet fluid in their informality. The man-made enters an antique landscape. Tentative and assertive in equal measure, the built form confronts timelessness. Spaces flow, roofs sweep, walls enclose, form emptied of imagery and nostalgia, design distilled with monastic rigor. excess banished to Mammon's door. And when the moment of inhabitation arrives, hopefully a celebratory chorus in unison. The river flows like it has always done. 260 moons go by. The house has now become the landscape. And that little girl, now 21, looks across mist and hazy memory, raises a toast to her grandfather. House K is the name, the first thing of my granddaughter. So why I'm showing you this is because, of course, the poem was appreciated and I got that piece of land. Now, I've been writing travelogues, and my first travelogue is The Master's Voice. And the first time I went to La Tourette, you can see the gray in between those two things is one of the cells, the monk cell. I had an out-of-body experience. I don't know what was real, what was dream, what was abstract, what was. But I wrote this. What do you call it? The passage in which I speak to the architect of La Tourette, and he speaks to me. And I can have the book. Coming back from a quick trip from the village, I remembered I had to explore the peripheral forests. I will do this also at the same time. There would be still an hour or more of light. I set out into a cluster of ancient trees and soon came upon a small clearing. I'm taken aback to see some 30 or so crosses in the ground, simple ones made of 2 twigs tied together with hemp. I'd stumbled upon a graveyard. The simplicity of those crosses, the markers of intellectual and scholarly life and death, was intensely humbling. I saw the opposition the year before when I had visited the Brion cemetery where Carlos Carpa had sculpted the tomb for the Brioni family. A beautiful tomb, but sometimes bordering on excess. What I was witnessing here was personified frugality. This is now about La Tourette, of course. One, a worldly nobility, the other, a nobility of the spirit. I began to feel a bit chill and the air quite dense. A flight of ravens fluttered overhead and one alighted on a nearby branch, cawing at the clearing. And then I heard a voice resonate through the trees in heavenly French accented English. Unmistakably, it was God himself of the architecture firmament. I've been following the inspiration of your house K from my oeuvre, he said, at least in the pilotis and the idea of this Dominican cell. Although you have tried to make it your own, why the inclined plane? You should have sustained the rigor and not found a fait accompli for the roof. The indictment was total and was transmitted with remarkable clarity, slow and purposeful. It took me a long time to recover from this terse critique. The raven stared down at me as if a witness to the unfolding conversation. Was I expected to give a retort, challenge God? Of course, it took me some time to wonder whether I had heard the voice at all. Was this the result of a delayed delirium from the day before? Or was I just indulging in self-critique like I often do? Was it really the voice of the Franco-Swiss God? By now it had begun to get dark and a chill went through my spine. I was never in a cemetery at night and I can't say I had no fear. But I had to respond. I am humbled that you speak of my work, Master, I somehow managed to say. It was a long drawn-out decision for me to take. I didn't see it as an inclined plane, but more as a pair of tilted cubes breaking through a transverse wall. The hovering cuboid in between, stretching itself towards the landscape, was what I took away from La Tourette before even coming here. All I did was give it a neck, in a sense. Was I making sense at all? Was I being presumptuous, a non-entity speaking to a master architect in this manner? But suddenly, when he spoke again, he didn't seem godlike anymore. Perhaps I was imagining it earlier, brought up as we are to revere men and make them godlike, such men. He seemed to have read my thoughts. I spend wonderful times in your country and notice the reverence you pay to sages, sadhus, and gurus. In the West, we don't do that, and it isn't expected, although there are saints for the religious. I like that you put forth your case, but if you had treated the project as a pavilion in the hills, you might have been able to let the hill pass through it like the wind in the poplars. You began with rigor, but didn't persevere. Since you are your own client, the architect in you must triumph. My clients here were intelligent and scholarly monks, but eventually one must listen to the inner voice. That was indeed my intention, I wanted to say, but then I sensed the air had thinned and he wasn't there anymore, and neither was the raven. It was now almost totally dark in the forest. I had begun to break into a sweat and I suddenly realized I was running. The wind was playing tricks in the trees and the sounds produced could have been straight from Alfred Hitchcock. The unmarked crosses receded behind me and the masterpiece that is the Dominican monastery slowly came into view. The lights gave it an ephemeral quality, one that one doesn't associate with during the day. And out of the forest, I realized that the building was lit by a million stars, stars that I did not see before. My camera never managed to capture that gravitas of the moment. I realized I had to dab my eyes, so emotionally charged I was. The experience had shaken me. As I left La Tourette the next day, I made a vow that I would return. I turned back one last time before hurtling down the hill. No, I did not see a tall, elegant man in a striped suit, a bow tie, and two thick black circles with spectacles leaning against the entrance. But I had heard his voice. In real time or in dream time, it really didn't matter. Thank you.